now recording, and this will be made available on the Essential Information for Schools site under the topic of visits from the Health and Safety Executive. So Sean, could I hand over to you in the first instance? Sean, you're on mute.
I had clicked it, but it takes a while to come off. We're a bit slow today. Thanks for inviting me. It's good to see some faces that I've met on several occasions, and good to see some people that I haven't. What Jim's asked me to do is, obviously in July we carried out a set of reassurance visits to our controlled maintained schools and those who buy back our services who wanted a visit, bearing in mind the September opening and some queries on the risk assessment. So I just wanted to feed back some general good practice that we've seen, and also some specific good practice that we've observed. From all of our visits, there is a consistent theme throughout this. There was a lot of clear evidence that heads have been put a lot of thought into the risk profiling, the mitigation of risk, and elimination of risk wherever possible, and that's occurred across all the schools that we visited. There was a clear emphasis on health and safety and the protection of staff, and that's led from the top. And it was evident on the sites that we visited that obviously there was a lot of thought and planning had gone into how to balance suitable protective measures in delivering a full and balanced curriculum. Because I think that was one of the early questions that were raised by some of our heads about how they were going to maintain that balance, as well as tried to provide an environment that was conducive to learning, and head teachers seem to have hit that, and we were really pleased with what we saw. There was a very positive, clear and consistent approach to the challenges being faced about keeping children and staff safe. In all the schools that we went to, there was a clear regimented cleaning process in place. Some schools were doing this by backup checking controls until it became good practice, and then demonstrating also sustainable and resilient supply chains in that as well, just in case the PPE supply, etc., and cleaning materials was a problem. So we were able to see that as well. It was good to see that use of multiple entrances, external classroom doors wherever possible, splitting up play areas into sections so that 2 metre social distancing could allow some pupil interaction. The principles of bubbles was being applied to all aspects of the school activities. And staff were well versed in personal hygiene processes in school. And it was particularly impressive with a couple of schools that I went to, is that some very young children were even telling me how to follow the hygiene rules and maintain social distancing. So that was good to observe when you've got particularly young children who are telling me where to stand and what I needed to do when I was walking around the school. So that was good to see as well. We've had several head teachers approaching us with keeping up to date with guidance and also exploring alternative suggestions for cleaning controls, and one of those has been the use of fogging techniques, and we have one inquiry about the use of copper film on high use areas. And what we tend to do when we get those queries come through is we will liaise with our public health consultants to see what the evidence is out there for those particular measures. Some of the particular individual stuff that we did, a couple of schools were adopting an arms wide open approach for pupils to try and remind them about how to maintain social distancing, and we saw staff and pupils doing that, so holding their arms out wide to try and enforce that separation. We've seen some portable cough and sneeze screens that one particular school has used. So if there are any problems with not being able to sit side to side or in a well ventilated room, these portable screens with a little letterbox type through the middle was able to be placed into classrooms so interaction could occur. We've seen lots of innovative ways of marking out social distancing on carpets, which is good to see. Use of PPE boxes so that staff know where PPE is stored within particular classrooms and isolation rooms. Turning backs in corridors during transit. Use of DFE information hygiene posters in classrooms. And also there was one particular school that had a toilet pass system to also ensure that one pupil was using the toilets at one at a time. So they said that was working particularly well. So overall, I don't think we had any negative feedback whatsoever. I think any themes that we have was it's quite easy to creep on the 2 meter social distancing. I think we're social creatures by nature, and sometimes what people understand 2 meters to be can be less in reality. And just a reminder about fire doors, really, in the fact that we need to have adequate ventilation, but we just need to be mindful of our responsibilities under fire risk assessments and putting fire controls in place. So overall, it was great to interact with you all and to meet some of you. And I know that some have been in touch and continue to liaise with us. So that's essentially it, Jim.
Thanks, Sean. That's really useful, and I think that those principles are relevant to schools whether they buy into Plymouth City Council health and safety or not. It's the same set of principles. Sean, are you able to circulate just some brief bullet points following the meeting?
I've got these broken down into simple bullet points that I can send out, and so Jim for circulation.
We can put that into the bulletin. Anne-Marie, I've noticed you have joined the meeting, which I was quite pleased about. Would you be able to give us a summary of your experiences from this morning?
Yeah, so the lady who visited from the Health and Safety Executive, name was Emma O'Hara. She stayed about 2 hours. She spent the first sort of 45 minutes with me in my office. She wore a mask, I didn't, and we stayed as far apart as we possibly could. We went through the risk assessment and the plan for staff, all of which she had access to before the visit. So I'd sent that all through last week. She said that the findings had just come out from all of the spot checks that had taken place in Scotland. And she was really pleased to see that the main findings from those were around ventilation and around social distancing, and that on the whole, all of those visits had been positive, and any information that had been passed was in an advisory capacity. There were no sanctions that came out of any of those visits. She said that the plan that I had in place and the risk assessment that I had in place was very comprehensive, and she could see all the work that had gone into it. She thanked me for that. She asked me how I'd been supported with that, and I explained, Sean, that you had been fantastic in your support with the risk assessment and then reviewing the risk assessment and all of the plans. I also explained that as a school, we'd had a visit in the summer term from the health and safety team at Plymouth City Council, and that Malcolm had visited and done a walk around the school and checked the risk assessments. She was very happy with this. She thought that was really good practice. I had some information from my school council, which we went through, so I had a bit of pupil voice around what they liked about the new systems and measures. Basically that they get the playground to themselves a bit more, and they quite like eating in the classrooms because the teachers put a video on for them, or they can listen to an audio book, that kind of thing. But she really liked the fact that I'd engaged the school council and that I had some pupil voice around what the children were saying. She wanted to speak to 3 different members of staff. I had explained prior to the visit that we don't really have a big union contingent here. All my staff are in unions, but there's no union rep. And I think that's what she wanted to know before the visit. She wanted to have access to union reps if indeed we had union reps. We didn't, so she then spoke to my caretaker, asked him what his input had been into the risk assessment and into all the plans. She then spoke to one of my teaching assistants who is extremely clinically vulnerable, and there's a separate risk assessment in place for her. And she also spoke to my year 1 teacher. The question was always the same. It was always around what input they'd had into the risk assessment and the plan, whether they felt that the plan was their plan or whether it had been kind of done unto them, I presume. and whether or not they felt that they could raise any issues or any concerns, or if they had anxieties, would they be able to come and talk to me or to somebody else about them, and would that actually have an outcome? So she was very happy with the conversations that she'd had with staff. She then did a walk around the room, so she was around the school, sorry. So she was looking at the signage that was in place. She didn't go into any of the classrooms. We stood at the doors, but she was looking for tables facing forward. She was looking for adults socially distancing from each other. And she did say that we were a bit cold, that maybe I'd gone a bit OTT with the ventilation. So the way the site is set up, all of the classrooms have an outdoor door, if you like, so a door that opens to the outside. And all the way through this, I've said that those doors have to stay open for ventilation. But she said that actually we could close those doors as long as the windows were open. And we could even close the windows as well if it was a particularly cold day or particularly wet. And you could ventilate the room when the children were out to play or when they'd left that room for any sort of period of time. So I thought that was quite interesting, because obviously it's getting colder and I've got some children that are sitting in their coats because they're complaining it's a bit too cold. What else? That's about it off the top of my head. I haven't really stopped since about 9 o'clock this morning.
Bless you, Anne-Marie.
But it all went very well. She was very, it felt like a nice visit. It wasn't judgmental, it was advisory. And she was, you know, she said to me, have you got any questions? And we had a bit of an issue with the office. I've got 2 staff in the office and we couldn't kind of work out the best way of having them both in the office at the same time. So we kind of had them working in different parts of the building, but we've come up with a plan for the office now, which was really good. And then my COVID room, I've got a room that is empty, but I really could do to use it with people like speech and language therapists or counsellors, you know, when you've got people like that are coming in to work with individual children. So I spoke to her about whether that room has to be completely, you know, single purpose or whether it could be dual purpose, and she's going to come back to me with that one. That's about it, really.
No, thanks. That's a really, really useful summary, sort of hot off the press.
Very hot.
Yeah, the hottest you possibly can. Sean, yesterday you mentioned to me something about the initial calls into schools. Does that still stand?
I know that Judith's given me some feedback and information. We had some feedback from our SAPED committee. It's sort of like the safety practitioners from across the Southwest. And when this first started, it was Civica who were making the calls. And there were some concerns, particularly with executive heads, that Civica were demanding that the head be in the school to answer the questions directly, and if they weren't, they were then being referred for a visit straight away. So in Devon and in Somerset as well, there were some particular concerns back. And I know in our initial discussions, Anne-Marie, we talked about the fact that because you hadn't been around to take the call, had that prompted the visit. We've got no specific evidence of that at this particular moment in time, and we haven't been able to engage with the HSE to find out what the processes are. I'm hoping within the next day or two, and possibly even in the next bulletin, is to try and get some FAQs out, so people can understand and have a link to the original bulletin from the HSE about the visits, about the sorts of questions that might be asked, and it covers some of the things that you were talking about, Anne-Marie, particularly in the question about trade union reps, and the fact that the way that we've engaged with them has been through the panel process, that we've been dealing with predominantly lead reps and local reps where needs be. So I'm hoping to get that out shortly in that as well, but no further information about if you're not around that automatically prompts a visit or not. I haven't had any evidence brought to me to say that's occurring.
It wasn't
Sean.
that I wasn't around. When she first phoned, or when the phone call came in, not the lady who came to do the visit, but the phone call, I had to go and open the gates to let my my clubs out. And so I said I didn't have 10 minutes to answer the questions, and could they phone back? And they said that was fine. And then when they did phone back, I did go through and answer all their questions. So
Okay.
Okay, thanks very much. Heidi, I can see a question for you in the chat about whether it's okay that children don't socially distance in a bubble. So, Anne-Marie, did any of those issues come up this morning on your visit around social distancing of children?
She saw children. She saw my year ones out to play, and they were not social distancing. Believe me, they were not. So they were out to play, and she didn't say anything about that. She saw my year threes coming out to get their coats to go out to play. There wasn't an awful lot of social distancing going on there either. And foundation, well, I'm not going to say anything about, I mean, they're not socially distancing. She didn't say anything about the children. She was just looking at the tables facing forward, and if the children were at tables, she asked whether they had their own stuff, so their own stationery, wallets and things, which we have gone down that road. We've done that. She was more concerned about staff socially distancing from each other and from the children. It was more about that.
Sean, have you got any further comments there around the social distancing pupils, staff, and how those issues play themselves out?
I was going to say it's slightly different for our primary schools as opposed to our secondary schools. I think the information is under 12s, and from what I'm aware, as long as children under the age of 12 are in their bubbles, we've got no particular issues. I mean, the information that we've got from public health at this moment in time is that the majority of transmission occurs between adult to adult in small, poorly ventilated rooms, particularly when we're talking about schools and general transmission in that as well. There was a paper released this morning that I haven't had a chance to read about the role of children in transmission. And I'm going to be following that up with public health. But no, I think that confirms the principles that we're working to, in the fact that the HSE are more focused on adult to adult transmission, because that's where the evidence is saying at the moment. And just in reply to your thing about ventilation, Anne-Marie, literally last week, I had a query from Julie Bevan to John Hunt about ventilation, and it talked about that balancing the control measures with an environment conducive to learning, and also the legal minimum of temperatures in classrooms. And I think as they were looking to struggle with aspects of their building management system, they were looking to keep more communal areas more well ventilated, to try and discourage people from hanging around in the communal areas and building up other groups. But in the classrooms, they were looking at moving more towards, in the summer months and the summer periods where they could keep the windows and doors open all day, to look towards what they were suggesting about when the classrooms aren't occupied, that is your opportunity for adequate ventilation, if you want to open doors and windows. So that would just concur with the advice that I gave to Julie last week.
Thanks, Sean.
Yeah.
Heidi, I noticed you've asked a question about the plan being different to the risk assessment. What could you just run through that, please? Oh, and you're on mute.
Yeah, Anne-Marie mentioned a plan and a risk assessment. I don't know, I can't recall. Did we have a plan? I mean, we've got a plan, but I mean, is it different from the risk assessment?
So I've kind of got a risk assessment, and then all the detail that sits under the risk assessment, like which year group uses which toilet.
Oh, okay, I've got that. Yeah,
that kind of thing. Okay. Is that plan for staff bit?
Yeah, I got it.
And then the two kind of feed into each other.
Yep.
It's kind of, the plan has got quite a lot more detail on the ground.
Yeah, I know what you mean now. Thank you.
Didn't know what else to call it.
Are there any further questions for either Anne-Marie or Sean? I'll take a silence and a no yellow hands appearing to mean that we're clear of that. Okay, as I said before, this is a sort of a one-item agenda today. So if no one's got any further questions on the agenda item, what I will do is go round for any other business, and I'll go round in the order that I can see everybody. So Tracy, any other business for you? Anne-Marie?
Nope.
Graham, any other business for you?
Nope. Interesting stuff.
Peter?
No, thanks.
Heidi? Sean?
Just to say, Jim, that we're updating our information on Pod, and one of the things that we'll be looking at is looking at the risk assessment template for school and seeing if there's any need to update that. And also we're looking at a second round of reassurance visits to come out and engage with schools again to do the same thing that we did in July. So a further opportunity to ask us any questions and talk about any issues. But I'm hoping there'll be some information in the bulletin and or on Pod over the next couple of days.
Okay, thanks, Sean. Make sure those link together. So that'll be on the essential information for schools site. Sharon, anything else from you? Heather?
No, nothing from me.
Stephen?
No, just thank you to Anne-Marie and Sean, really.
Bernie?
No, nothing from me. Just again, echo that. Thanks. It's really useful to hear that first-hand experience. Thanks, Anne-Marie.
Bev?
You're welcome.
No, just to remind people what our plan for next week is.
Sorry, Bev, which, with regard to?
Sarah Jane, can you hear me? With regard to how to respond.
Sorry, Bev, you're cutting out there. I don't know whether it's me or everybody else. Could you put that in the chat? Would that be okay? Lucinda?
No.
And finally, Anne.
I wasn't able to make the meeting this morning. I haven't been sent that link, so I was confused with the two meetings today. I just wondered, were you sharing this morning, Heidi?
Pardon? What did you say, Anne?
I wasn't able to make the meeting that happened. Wasn't sent that link. Were you sharing your experiences this morning?
Yes, I'm able to. I'll ring you separately if you like. Or
yeah.
Did you get my notes that were forwarded?
I haven't yet, but that doesn't mean they're not there. I haven't seen anything yet.
They're in the bulletin.
They're in the bulletin, are they?
They're in the bulletin, yeah.
Okay. And thanks for raising that. I will check that you're included on the maintained heads meeting. So that's what we had this morning.
Oh, I have the notes from Friday in the bulletin that you'd made. So those are really helpful. I would just wanted to hear, what you were sharing this morning. Was the recording made of that or not?
No, we didn't record this morning's.
Oh, I'll speak to you separately.
Well, I did do it last Monday, and that was recorded.
Yeah.
Yes, and that should be up on the. Thank you, Heidi. That should be up on the essential information for schools site. We were just sorting out the final technical intricacies of getting this video out of Teams and up onto the site, but I think those have been solved. Okay. I think I've asked everybody for any other business. If I haven't, if you could raise your hand, because I know there's just people have moved around a bit more. Okay, so this will be up onto the website, and I just want to remind everybody that if there's any items for the agenda for next Monday's meeting at 1 p.m, just to send those through to Kathy Brettle. Okay, thanks very much, everybody.
See you later.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.